All right, let's get into it. We are going to deconstruct one of W.B. Yeats's most powerful and, honestly, most personal poems. This thing is way more than just pretty words on a page. It's a raw, anxious, and deeply moving prayer from a brand new father who's staring into a really chaotic future, just trying to build some kind of shield for his newborn daughter. So, the poem kicks off with this incredibly powerful image. You've got a baby, his daughter Anne, just sleeping peacefully, totally oblivious to this violent storm that's literally raging outside. And that contrast, the quiet innocence inside versus the absolute chaos outside, that's the engine that drives this entire poem. And that's really the heart of the matter right there. You have to picture it. It's 1919. Yeats is his famous poet, but he's also a new dad. The whole world is just reeling from World War I, and his home, Ireland, is spiraling into political violence. So he's filled with this feeling he calls a great gloom. And all of that anxiety just pours right into this prayer for his little girl. Okay, so first, let's really break down the central image of the storm. Because for Yeats, this isn't just about some bad weather. No, he's grappling with two storms at once, and they're both connected.
So on the one hand, you've got the literal physical storm. He talks about a roof-leveling wind that's just hammering his home. But that's just a symbol for the real storm, the metaphorical one. He's imagining the future, this terrifying future, dancing to a frenzied drum. And that sound? That's the sound of war, of fanaticism, of what he calls the murderous innocence, of a world that's just tearing itself to pieces. Now, here's where his prayer starts to get really interesting. You'd think, as a father, his first wish would be for safety or health, right? But no, he starts with something surprising. He's actually afraid that his daughter might be too beautiful. And he makes this really fascinating distinction. He prays that she'll be beautiful, yeah, but not so beautiful that it becomes a trap. On the right, you see what he fears. That extreme beauty leads to vanity, makes you lose your kindness, and ultimately leaves you unable to find a friend. What he really wants for her is on the left, a moderate beauty. Just enough to be loved, but not so much that it completely overshadows who she is as a person. And he's got proof to back this up, at least in his mind. He pulls out these huge examples from mythology. He's like, look at Helen of Troy. Her legendary beauty started a war and ended in misery. And then there's Aphrodite, the literal goddess of beauty who, in his opinion, made a terrible choice for a husband. For Yeats, history shows that the most beautiful women often make foolish, self-destructive choices. So that brings us to his second big fear. If being too beautiful is a danger from the outside, this next threat is one that comes from within, the poison of hatred. Specifically, the kind that's born from a really opinionated, passionate mind. Now, we need to be really clear here. Yeats isn't just talking about, disliking someone. He's warning against something he calls intellectual hatred. This is that rigid, absolute certainty that your opinions are the only ones that matter. A belief so strong it just burns away everything else. Kindness, humility, peace. He calls it the worst of all evil chances. And this fear, wow, is it personal for him? This whole section is a direct shot, though he doesn't name her, at Maud Gonne, the great unrequited love of his life. He saw this absolutely lovely woman who, in his view, traded all her grace and goodness for radical politics, for what he bitterly calls an old bellows full of angry wind. He is desperate for his daughter not to go down that same road. Okay, so after outlining all these fears, Yeats finally shifts to his hopes. He starts to build this kind of blueprint for his daughter's soul, praying for the exact virtues that he thinks will be her shield against that howling storm of the world. The first part of his big metaphor is this image of a flourishing hidden tree. See, he doesn't want her to be some big public spectacle. He wants her to have a quiet strength, to be grounded and self-sufficient, just happy and content in her own space. And he pairs that tree image with this one. He wants her thoughts to be like a linnet, which is a little songbird. Basically, he hopes her inner world is just filled with cheerful, kind, generous thoughts that spread joy naturally, not because of some argument or political agenda. So if you pull it all together, this is the ideal woman he's imagining for his daughter. She's not defined by incredible beauty or fiery opinions, but by courtesy, a joyful soul, and a deep, solid connection to tradition, which he compares to a laurel tree that's rooted in one dear perpetual place. And here's the ultimate payoff. This is the big prize. For Yeats, if you can get rid of that intellectual hatred, your soul recovers something really profound. It's radical innocence. It becomes self-delighting and self-appeasing.
Basically, you find happiness from within, which makes you untouchable by the storms raging outside.
This brings us to the poem's grand finale, where Yeats lays out the last and maybe the most important piece of his protective prayer. This is the ultimate shelter he imagines for his daughter's soul.
So what's his final wish? It's for her to marry a man who will bring her to a house where everything is accustomed, ceremonious. He's literally praying for her to marry into the old aristocracy, into a life that's governed by tradition, by ritual, and by established order. For him, that is the ultimate sanctuary. This table breaks down his formula perfectly. On the one hand, you have custom, symbolized by that laurel tree, that deep-rootedness that leads to radical innocence. And on the other, you have ceremony, symbolized by the horn of plenty, the rich, ordered rituals that create a true, lasting kind of beauty. It's his recipe for a stable, meaningful life. And he ends with this really powerful contrast. He says that all the arrogance and hatred he's so afraid of, that stuff is common. It's like cheap goods being peddled in the thoroughfares of the messy, modern world. But in a life of custom and ceremony, he believes those poisons just can't take root. And so, this prayer, written over a century ago, leaves us with this huge, timeless question. When the world feels like it's spinning out of control, is the structure of tradition a vital shelter that protects us, or is it just a cage that limits our freedom? That's the tension that still beats at the very heart of the Swather's prayer.